I want to take a little moment to take a look at some of the an attack in action again. It's something I don't do very often. I realized I screwed up here, but I counted up the strength on these. I'm making an attack here. I just succeeded in making one over here. I counted up the strength on these, and the two German units that are attacking. And yes, I'm continuing the attacks in the winter, but I'm trying to conserve supplies as much as possible because I think that's vital. I know the French don't have supplies, so they're not going to be able to play here. When I counted that up, I come up with, I don't remember what exactly it was. It was like 57 strength points, which works out to be, what, 28 and a half halved. It goes up to 29. Great. Okay, so I got 29. I look on here, and I see what I'm likely to get damage-wise. Now, there are 7 French strength points here. 8. 7. They do not have supply, which means they're going to be counterattacking at a 4 times 3 is 12. If I can't make them retreat. They'll counterattack it at 8 if I make them retreat. Okay. I don't really care about what they do to me on the counterattack, but what I do care is that I cause 4 points of damage because they'll retreat. They're still building their trenches here because I pushed them so far back. Okay, so when I look at the 29 chart, I say, well, I only get a 4 over on a 3, but if I can bump it up to the 32 chart, I get a 4 on a 2. So, by spending 1 point of supply, and I've got some supplies now, I end up with this better chart. Now, here's the problem. There's actually a little piece of terrain there, a little piece of broken terrain, which is going to give me a -1 and +1 to the die roll. So it's not quite that good. I gotta push it further. I kind of do want to take this. 8 more points gets me up to a 41, which is pretty good. I still might fail over here, but as long as I roll a 1 or high, a 2 or higher, 1 total, I'm okay. 8 more is going to cost me 2 more supply though, because see, I've already counted half the strength of the unit, so I'm only getting an extra half. At each point of supply for the Germans supplies 8 strength points of units. So I got to throw 2 more supply in. And yes, this is the kind of thing you do. And well, let's see what happens. I just added 8 strength points. I've got a -1 on the die roll. And yeah, I know we've seen the combat before. So I got a significantly good roll. I got a 4. That means I'm going to do 7 points, so I mark that down. Now that's enough to cause it to surrender. So I multiply that by 2 and divide it by 3. And I end up with the French are going to lose 5 and retreat. Now for the French, I have to subtract 4 from their strength. So they're only going to be rolling on the 8 table, but they have a +1. And they get a 6. They're only going to do 1 to me. And of course those are going to be reflected here, and I'll show you the retreat in the situation afterward. Also, I'm going to point out the application of another rule over here. The French are entrenched. Now, I've got units on opposite sides, so you'd think, well, there's a rule that negates the French trench for that. But no, it doesn't, because there are 2 units adjacent to one another, adjacent to it, on the French line. And they count as holding that line. So let me see how this works. Right, they don't have to be entrenched. That's important because this guy over here is not. But as long as the line is contiguous, the entrenchments are considered to be an angle in the trench and not a big deal. So they're not actually outflanked there. That's an important situation. If I get this hex, then, or this one, but then this trench would be surrounded and negated by being attacked from the back, and that would be a bad position. I'm going to decide not to attack the trenches. I was planning on hitting them while the French don't have supply. Well, let me rethink that. See, I'm looking at this trench in particular, and I've got some 55 strength points surrounding it. 55 strength points against one unit means that, well, it's not one unit, but it's an entrenched 5 strength points. There's a 1 strength point underneath it. That means I'm going to need 5 hits to it. Now, 50 is going to give me 5 if there were no modifiers, but there's a -2 for the trench and another -1 for the terrain there, the broken terrain in between these two hex sides, which they can call in. Actually, it's also between these two hex sides. So even one of the attackers is actually on it. That means I've got like a 50-50 chance of breaking the line here. The cost would be 7 supply. I only have 30, and I spent a few points already. I think I'm more efficient in spending the points where I've got a weak line already. And I think that's kind of the point to the game is, as long as you've got a weak line, you want to keep attacking it. But once you hit the trench line, you've got to start saving up for the historical offensives. Now, whether or not the lines ever solidify, whether there can be enough French units to hold the line for a whole month, we'll see when that happens. It's going to happen. If you look at the points coming in, the number of troops coming in, eventually there are going to be so many Allied forces on the board here, and there's withdrawals for the Germans, so their troops don't really add much necessarily. Eventually there's going to be so much for the Allies that the German offensive does have to stop. Should it stop now? I don't think so. The situation's still fluid enough that I want to keep fighting. And then I think you start seeing the attack and counter-attack dynamic. We'll see how it works, but I've got really high hopes to see the game rules that don't enforce offensives making them desirable. I've had a lot of worry that maybe it doesn't. And if the front never stabilized, it wouldn't. But I think if it does turn into a true static warfare, it's going to be very, very interesting. I'll count this one, make sure it's okay. And well, after the attacks that made some impressive gains here and here, well, I also made the attacks on the trenches. I just didn't expend supply on them. I did them purely attritionally. This one was wise. I had good numbers there. This one I got bad rolls and less good numbers. Ended up losing an extra point over the French. It was 2-3. Nothing terrible there, but I usually like to cause a decent amount more damage than I'm taking, because I know the German future looks bleak in terms of they're not going to have a lot of points available. Alright. I think I ought to split this into pieces, because I've got kind of that combat example that I want to point out. Okay.